At Christmas dinner, my mother's brother leaned in and asked, "So, did that cash help you out?" I scowled and replied, "What money?" He went still, his fork suspended midair. I looked over at my mom. She didn't even bother to deny it. She'd silently diverted every cent and never said a word. I thought it was going to be another perfect Christmas Eve, until my Uncle Arthur asked a casual question that didn't just ruin dinner, it ripped open a secret my own mother had been hiding for months, making me wonder, what the hell has my family been hiding from me? My name is Clara Miller, and I'm 28. Picture this, I'm at the dining table, Christmas carols are playing softly, the house smells like pine and roasted turkey, you know, all the cozy, festive vibes. I was just passing the gravy boat to my brother, David, when Uncle Arthur leaned forward, a casual, almost innocent look on his face. "So, Clara," he began, "has the money been helping with your situation? Evelyn mentioned you might need a bit more next month." The entire table went silent. You could literally hear a pin drop. My hand, still holding the gravy boat, just stopped. Money? What money? I blinked, genuinely confused. What money? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Uncle Arthur's hand, still clutching the mashed potato bowl midair, froze. The color just drained from his face like he'd seen a ghost. Then, I looked at my mom, Evelyn. Her fingers were trembling around her wine glass. She couldn't even pretend she didn't know what he meant. That's when my stomach dropped. That's when I knew, deep down, something was very, very wrong. To understand why that moment felt like a bomb had just exploded right there at our Christmas dinner table, you need to know a bit about my life, and frankly, my family. For 6 years, I'd been living in Boston, a high-flying finance professional, or at least, that's what I wanted everyone to believe. I'd moved away from my hometown of Burlington, Vermont, right after college, desperate to make it on my own. My relationship with Mom has always been complex. We love each other, absolutely, but there's always been this quiet tension. She wanted me close, I was hell-bent on proving I could succeed without any help. Uncle Arthur. He built his construction company from nothing. A true self-made man. I always thought he was proud, practical, straightforward. Mom, on the other hand, was the quintessential homemaker, church volunteer, family glue. On the surface, she and Arthur were the picture of supportive siblings. But I remember even as a kid, there were these weird, unspoken tensions I just couldn't grasp. Then, about 6 months ago, my carefully constructed independent life started to crumble. My investment firm underwent a massive restructuring. Despite glowing performance reviews, I was laid off, along with 30% of my department. The timing? Just awful. I'd recently signed a lease on a much more expensive apartment and financed a modest, but still new, car. But pride, man, pride is a dangerous thing. Instead of being honest, I kept up the charade during our weekly phone calls. "Oh, everything's great," I chirped. "Just transitioning to a new opportunity." The truth? I was burning through my savings at an alarming rate, terrified of being the failure who crawled back home. I had to make drastic cuts. First, I sublet my beautiful downtown apartment and moved into a tiny studio in, let's just say, a questionable neighborhood. The windows rattled every time a truck passed, and my upstairs neighbor seemed to practice river dancing at midnight. I sold my barely driven car and started taking the bus. My designer work clothes. Consignment shops. Meals became a depressing parade of ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. What no one knew, not a soul, was that I was also dealing with some serious health issues. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully, but the stress triggered debilitating migraines. Without insurance, the medication was insanely expensive, but I couldn't function enough to even look for a job without it. I was barely holding it together. Mom's home, where we gathered for that fateful Christmas dinner, is a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch. Walking through that door always feels like stepping back in time. The same family photos lining the staircase. The comforting scent of Mom's signature apple cinnamon candles. It's this weird mix of stability I both craved and fiercely rejected. My older brother, David, arrived with his wife, Sarah, just before me. They live about 45 minutes away and, honestly, they have the perfect life, good jobs, a cute house, and they're expecting their first child. David works for Uncle Arthur's company, the path I was always expected to follow but refused. I just always thought I needed to carve my own way. There's always been this unspoken competition between us, fueled by what I perceived as Mom's favoritism toward me, and Uncle Arthur's toward David. After all, David stayed close, joined the family business, married his high school sweetheart. I was the rebel. During our greetings in the foyer, I noticed something off. David couldn't quite meet my eyes, and Sarah was being overly nice, asking about my apartment and job with this strange, intense interest. At the time, I brushed it off, thinking it was just pregnancy hormones making her more emotional. But looking back now, oh, the signs were all there. The Miller family, we've always been experts at keeping secrets. It's our toxic superpower, wrapped up in this deceptive guise of protecting each other. We don't discuss problems until they become full-blown catastrophes. We dodge difficult conversations with practiced ease. We pretend everything is fine, even when it's clearly not. It's a dance we've all perfected, stepping around landmines of truth with choreographed precision. Little did I know, that Christmas Eve, all our carefully constructed facades would finally come crashing down. I arrived at Mom's house at precisely 6:30 p.m., the mandatory time for our annual Christmas Eve dinner. These gatherings had become a sacred tradition, Mom's way of ensuring we still connected despite the distance. The evening air was crisp, typical for late December in Vermont, and the house was festooned with twinkling lights and holly. "Clara, you're right on time," Mom called from the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She hugged me tightly, holding on a beat too long. When she finally pulled back, I noticed her eyes scanning my face with unusual intensity. "Have you lost weight?" she asked, her forehead creasing with concern. I forced a laugh. "Just been busy with work, Mom. You know how it is during year-end reviews." The lie slipped out so easily. In reality, cheaper groceries and sheer stress had indeed made my clothes looser. Uncle Arthur emerged from the living room, greeting me with his standard pat on the shoulder. "There's my city girl. How's that concrete jungle treating you?" "Can't complain," I replied, plastering on my practiced smile. "The firm's keeping me busy." As we moved to the living room where David and Sarah were already settled with drinks, I noticed Mom disappearing into the kitchen with unusual frequency. Each time she returned, her smile seemed more strained. She kept rearranging the appetizer platter even though nobody was touching it. "So, Clara, how's that fancy office of yours?" David asked, swirling his whiskey. "Still have that view of the harbor?" I nodded, taking a large sip of wine. "It's great. Nothing changes. Except, I hadn't seen that office in months, and the company had actually moved locations before the layoffs." Mom suddenly dropped a coaster, flinching at the small noise it made hitting the hardwood floor. "Sorry, just clumsy tonight," she muttered, but her hands were shaking slightly as she picked it up. Uncle Arthur seemed oblivious, launching into a story about a difficult client at his construction company. But I caught Mom giving him strange glances throughout the conversation. Whenever financial topics came up, like the new restaurant David and Sarah had tried, or the rising cost of baby supplies, Mom would quickly change the subject. When we finally moved to the dining room, the tension was palpable. The table was set with Mom's best china and the good silverware, the ones reserved for special occasions. "What's the occasion?" I asked, gesturing to the fancy settings. "No occasion," Mom replied, a little too quickly. just felt like using them. They shouldn't sit in the cabinet collecting dust. As we settled into our seats, I noticed Sarah giving David meaningful looks, as if they were having a silent conversation. Uncle Arthur cleared his throat repeatedly, a nervous habit he's had since I was a child. "So, Clara," Uncle Arthur began, passing the salad, "David tells me Boston real estate is getting even more expensive. Your neighborhood still treating you well?" I nodded, my mouth full of salad to avoid elaborating. In truth, my new neighborhood had already experienced 2 break-ins on my block alone. "You know, if you ever wanted to come back home for a while, your old room is always available," Mom interjected, not meeting my eyes. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really?" I insisted, annoyed at the familiar suggestion. "My career is in Boston." "Of course it is," she said quickly. "I'm just saying, options are good." When the conversation turned to my cousin Penelope's upcoming wedding, I felt my stomach tighten. The destination event in Hawaii was completely beyond my current budget. Not just the flights and hotel, but the expected gift from the registry where the cheapest item was a $200 serving platter. "I might not make it to the wedding," I admitted reluctantly. "Work is really hectic right now." "But your family," Mom protested. "Penelope would be heartbroken." "I know, but some projects can't be rescheduled," another lie. "We could help with the flight," Uncle Arthur offered casually. "Consider it an early Christmas gift." "No thanks," I said firmly. "I can handle my own expenses." Mom and Uncle Arthur exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. David raised an eyebrow at Sarah, who suddenly became very interested in buttering her roll. As the main course was served, Mom's famous pot roast with vegetables from her garden, the small talk became increasingly strained. Uncle Arthur asked about my investments, a topic he'd never shown interest in before. Mom kept filling my wine glass and insisting I take seconds, then thirds, of everything. David made an odd comment about how communication is important in families, that seemed to come out of nowhere. With each passing minute, the feeling that something wasn't right grew stronger. The air felt charged, like the heavy calm before a thunderstorm. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something to happen. And then, as I was reaching for the salt, it did. Uncle Arthur was passing the bowl of mashed potatoes my way, his weathered hands steady, just as they'd been when teaching me to bait a fishing hook 20 years ago. The dining room was filled with the comfortable sounds of silverware clinking against Mom's best china, and the grandfather clock ticking steadily in the hallway. David had just finished telling a story about a client at work, and a momentary lull settled over the table. That's when Uncle Arthur asked it. Casual as commenting on the weather, but with words that would shatter our family's foundation. "So, Clara," he said, his voice light, but his eyes, curious. "Has the money been helping with your situation? Evelyn mentioned you might need a bit more next month." Time seemed to slow. The bowl of potatoes hovered between us as my brain processed his words. Money? What money? What situation had Mom told him about? What money? I asked, genuinely confused. The change in the room was immediate. Dramatic. Uncle Arthur's hand froze mid-pass, the potato bowl suspended in air. His face transformed from casual inquiry to shocked realization in seconds, eyes widening, color draining from his cheeks. He looked like someone who'd just stepped on a landmine and heard the click beneath their foot. I turned to Mom, whose reaction was even more telling. The glass of water she'd been lifting to her lips stopped halfway. A small tremor caused ripples across its surface. Her face, usually so composed and ready with a deflecting smile, crumpled momentarily before she attempted to recover. But it was too late. I'd seen it. That flash of panic, guilt, and something else, fear. Evelyn. Uncle Arthur's voice had dropped an octave, now directed at my mother with a question of his own embedded in just her name. Mom set down her water glass with exaggerated care, like it might explode if handled too roughly. Her lipstick had left a perfect red imprint on the crystal edge. She couldn't meet my eyes, or anyone's. I just meant the care package, she attempted weakly. The one I sent last month, with the homemade granola and those socks you liked. The excuse was paper thin, and we all knew it. Uncle Arthur's furrowed brow and tight jaw made it clear he wasn't buying it either. David and Sarah exchanged loaded glances across the table. My brother's hand moved to cover his wife's, a gesture of solidarity that only confirmed my growing suspicion that everyone at this table knew something I didn't. "Mom," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "What money is Uncle Arthur talking about?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen, the tick-tock of the grandfather clock suddenly intrusive. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating our frozen tableau through the dining room curtains. "It's nothing, really," Mom finally said, her voice unnaturally high. She reached for the green beans, knocking over the salt shaker in her haste. "Oh, clumsy me. Let's just enjoy dinner, shall we? I made your favorite chocolate cake for dessert." Uncle Arthur set the potato bowl down with deliberate slowness. "Evelyn," he said again, this time with unmistakable warning in his tone. "What have you been doing?" Mom's facade finally cracked completely. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers fluttering nervously at her collar. "Arthur, please, not now," she whispered. "Yes, now." I insisted, my confusion rapidly transforming into anger. "What money are you talking about? Has someone been sending me money?" The tension had become unbearable. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it. Uncle Arthur's face had shifted from shock to something resembling profound disappointment. David was suddenly very interested in his pot roast, cutting it into smaller and smaller pieces. "I think," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence, "that you all need to talk about this." Mom's chair scraped harshly against the hardwood floor as she abruptly stood. "I need to check on the cake," she mumbled, nearly tripping in her haste to escape to the kitchen. "Mom!" I called after her, but she was already gone. Uncle Arthur put his head in his hands briefly before looking up at me with eyes that suddenly seemed older, wearier. "Clara," he said quietly, "I think your mother has been keeping secrets from both of us." The perfect Christmas Eve dinner had transformed into something unrecognizable in the span of seconds. With a single question, the carefully maintained illusion of normalcy had shattered, revealing whatever truth lay beneath. A truth that, apparently, everyone but Uncle Arthur and I had been privy to. I pushed back from the table, my appetite completely gone. "I'm going to talk to Mom," I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. As I walked toward the kitchen, I heard David murmur to Uncle Arthur, "I told her this would happen eventually." Whatever this was, I was about to find out. I pushed through the swinging door to the kitchen to find Mom rearranging dessert plates that were already perfectly aligned. Her hands trembled so badly that the china rattled. She didn't look up when I entered, though she must have heard me. "Mom," I said firmly, standing in the center of the kitchen. "Look at me." She continued fussing with the plates. "The cake needs another few minutes to set. I should have made it earlier, but I got distracted with the Mom." My voice was sharper than I intended, but it worked. She finally stopped and turned toward me, though her eyes focused somewhere over my shoulder rather than meeting mine. "What money was Uncle Arthur talking about?" "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just a misunderstanding." Her fingers pleated and unpleated the edge of her apron. "Don't do that," I said, feeling my frustration mounting. "Don't pretend this is nothing when clearly it's something big enough to make everyone at that table act like we're at a funeral instead of a Christmas dinner." The kitchen door swung open again as Uncle Arthur entered. His expression was grave, his usual confident posture diminished. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "tell her." Mom's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might bolt from the room, but instead she pulled out a kitchen chair and sank into it. "I was just trying to help," she whispered. Uncle Arthur moved to stand beside me, his presence solid yet somehow uncertain. "How much have you been sending her, Evelyn?" $2,000 a month, Mom admitted, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "Since May." The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. $2,000 every month. That's $10,000. Where would you even get that kind of money? I grabbed the counter for support. 12,000, actually, Mom corrected, still not looking at me. "I sent a little extra in July for your birthday." Uncle Arthur's sharp intake of breath told me this was news to him as well. "From where, Evelyn? We don't have that kind of disposable income." Mom's eyes finally met mine, filled with tears and something like desperate love. "I sold my mother's jewelry, our family's antique collection we were saving for Clara's wedding someday, and some of the silver that was just sitting in the cabinet." "Grandma's jewelry?" I whispered, stunned. Those pieces were family heirlooms, passed down for generations. Mom had always spoken of them with reverence, promising they would be mine someday for my special day. "You sold Mother's heirlooms without discussing it with me?" Uncle Arthur's voice had taken on a dangerous quietness. "I didn't think you'd understand, Arthur," Mom replied, a hint of defiance entering her tone. "My daughter needed help. I didn't ask for help," I exclaimed, my shock giving way to pure confusion and anger. "I never even knew about this money. How are you sending it?" "Direct deposits to your checking account," Mom said. "I set it up through the bank. The first of every month." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, opening my banking app. Sure enough, there they were. Monthly deposits labeled only as credit. I had assumed they were delayed bonuses or expense reimbursements from my former employer, never bothering to investigate further because I'd been so desperate for the money. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You're so proud, Clara," Mom said, wiping away a tear. "You wouldn't accept help even when we offered directly. Remember when your car needed repairs last year, or when your rent increased? You always say you're fine, that you can handle it." The kitchen door swung open again and David appeared, his expression grim. "She knew, by the way," he said, gesturing toward Mom, "about you losing your job. She's known for months." I felt like I'd been slapped. "How?" "Penelope told me," Mom admitted. "She saw you coming out of an unemployment office when she was in Boston for that conference in May. She was worried about you. So, you've all been lying to me." I choked out, the betrayal cutting deep, made worse by the gut-wrenching realization that my own pride had created this entire, awful situation. "Pretending you didn't know I was struggling, while secretly sending me money." I turned to David. "And you knew, too?" He nodded slowly. "Mom asked me not to say anything. She said it would just embarrass you." "And you were okay with her selling Grandma's heirlooms?" I pressed, "with lying to Uncle Arthur?" David had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I told her it wasn't right. That's why I've been helping her with some of the money for the past 2 months." Uncle Arthur's head snapped up. "You've been giving your mother money to send to Clara." "Someone had to," David retorted. "After Mom ran out of things to sell, she was talking about taking out a loan against the house." "A loan against your house, Evelyn?" Uncle Arthur couldn't even finish the sentence, looking at his sister, utterly defeated. "How could you make these decisions without me? You would have said, no, Arthur." Mom replied simply, a surprising strength entering her voice. "And Clara needed help. You don't know that I would have said no." Uncle Arthur argued, his voice rising. "You didn't give me the chance to say anything because you didn't tell me about the business problems either." Mom shot back unexpectedly. Uncle Arthur went very still. "What are you talking about?" The second mortgage you took out on your house last year, Mom continued, her voice gaining momentum. The credit card bills. Did you think I wouldn't notice, Arthur? I watched in astonishment as my mother and uncle stared at each other like strangers. David leaned against the doorframe, looking entirely unsurprised by this new revelation. The business had a temporary cash flow issue, Uncle Arthur said stiffly. It's resolved now. See? Mom threw up her hands. This is why I didn't tell you about helping Clara. You don't tell me when there are problems either. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My seemingly solid, stable family was built on quicksand. We were all keeping secrets, all pretending, all afraid to be vulnerable with each other. I checked my account every day, I said quietly, drawing everyone's attention back to me. I saw those deposits. I thought they were from work. I never even questioned it, because I needed that money so badly. Tears welled in my eyes. Do you know what that's like? To be so desperate that when money mysteriously appears in your account, you don't even question it because you're just relieved you can pay rent that month? Mom stood and tried to approach me, but I backed away. Why didn't you just ask me? I demanded. Why the secrecy? Would you have taken it if you knew it came from selling your grandmother's jewelry? Mom asked gently. The truth was, I wouldn't have. My pride would have prevented it, even as I struggled to keep my electricity on. That wasn't your decision to make, I said finally. You took away my choice. I'm your mother, she replied, as if that explained everything. I couldn't watch you suffer. So instead, you lied, I stated. You all lied. I looked around at my family. Mom, with her desperate need to help. Uncle Arthur, with his business troubles he'd hidden. David, with his complicity in the deception. We're supposed to be a family. We are a family, Uncle Arthur said wearily. A family with serious communication problems, apparently. The chocolate cake Mom had been so worried about sat forgotten on the counter, its perfect frosting a mockery of our imperfect family. As we stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our secrets, I realized we had reached a turning point. What happened next would either break us apart completely or force us to rebuild something more honest from the ruins. We migrated back to the dining room in silent agreement, the forgotten Christmas dinner growing cold on our plates. The air felt heavy with unspoken words and shattered pretenses. I sat down slowly, feeling like I'd aged years in the span of minutes. I think, Uncle Arthur said, breaking the oppressive silence, it's time we all put our cards on the table. No more secrets. David cleared his throat. While we're being honest, I have something to say, too. He glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. I've resented how Mom always seems to make excuses for Clara. It's always been that way. When she decided to move to Boston instead of joining your company, Uncle Arthur. When she missed family events for work. And now, this secret money. I've worked alongside you for years, building this company, staying close to home, doing everything right, according to the Miller family playbook. And still, somehow, Clara gets the special treatment. That's not true. Mom protested weakly. It is true, David insisted. You sold Grandma's jewelry for her. Jewelry that's been in the family for generations. Meanwhile, when Sarah and I needed help with the down payment on our house, you gave us a loan with a repayment schedule and interest, Uncle Arthur. I stared at my brother, genuinely surprised. I never asked for special treatment. You didn't have to, he replied bitterly. You were always Mom's favorite. David. Mom exclaimed. It's okay, Evelyn, Uncle Arthur interjected, his voice tired. If we're clearing the air, let's really clear it. He turned to David. Your mother has always worried more about Clara because she saw herself in her, independent, determined to make it on her own. And you've always been more like me, David. practical, rooted in family and tradition. So, you're saying you play favorites, too, Uncle Arthur? David challenged. Uncle Arthur sighed heavily. I'm saying we're human. We connected differently with each of you. That doesn't mean we love one more than the other. I tried to process this revelation while simultaneously dealing with the knowledge that my mother had been secretly supporting me for months. I still don't understand why there was so much secrecy. Why couldn't we just talk to each other? Because that's not what Millers do, Uncle Arthur said with unexpected bitterness. We don't discuss problems. We fix them quietly and move on. Or pretend to fix them, Mom added quietly. Uncle Arthur looked at her sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Mom's hands twisted in her lap. It means there are things we haven't talked about for years, Arthur. Important things. Like what? I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. Like the fact that you still haven't settled with me for Grandma's estate, Arthur, even after all these years, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. Or that you never truly recovered from the market crash and your business is still struggling. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Uncle Arthur, the steady rock, had financial vulnerabilities hidden from everyone, even his own sister. Why? I managed to ask. Because I'm supposed to be the provider. The strong one, Uncle Arthur said, frustration evident in his voice. I couldn't let my sister and niece see me fail. And because you don't listen, Arthur. Mom countered, years of sibling resentment bubbling to the surface. You always think you know best. I work to provide for this family. Uncle Arthur's fist came down on the table, making the dishes jump. We don't need provisions, Arthur. We need you. Mom's voice broke on the last word. Sarah, who had been silent throughout most of this, gently placed her hand on the table. I think what we're seeing here is a pattern, she said softly. A pattern where everyone in this family is afraid to admit when they need help, or when something's wrong. We all looked at her, this relative outsider who somehow saw our dysfunction more clearly than we did. Clara wouldn't admit she lost her job, Sarah continued. Evelyn couldn't directly offer help, so she sent money secretly. Arthur hid business troubles. David resented Clara, but never said anything directly. You're all so afraid of appearing vulnerable that you've created this web of secrets instead. Her words hung in the air, uncomfortable, but undeniably true. I didn't tell anyone about losing my job because I was ashamed, I admitted, my voice small. I thought I was supposed to be the successful one, proving that leaving home was the right choice. And I didn't tell you I knew because I was afraid you'd push me away completely if I offered help directly, Mom said. You've always been so independent. Even as a little girl, you never wanted help tying your shoes or zipping your coat. I didn't tell anyone about the business difficulties because I'm supposed to be the provider. The rock, Uncle Arthur added quietly. The business is what gives this family security. And I never said anything about feeling second best because complaining seemed ungrateful when we have so much, David concluded. We sat in silence. The weight of these admissions settling over us. Generations of poor communication patterns were suddenly laid bare. The toxic legacy of well-intentioned silence. My parents were the same way, Mom finally said. My father lost his job when I was 12, but they pretended everything was fine for months. We kept going to restaurants and buying new clothes while they secretly sold their possessions and drained their savings. When we finally lost the house, it came as a complete shock to me. I promised myself I'd never let my children experience that kind of sudden devastation. So instead, you created a different kind of deception, I observed, not unkindly. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. My father was the same, Uncle Arthur added unexpectedly. Never talked about problems, just handled them. When he got sick, he hid it from everyone until he literally collapsed at work. By then, the cancer had spread too far to treat effectively. The pieces were falling into place. Our family's dysfunction hadn't started with us. It was inherited, passed down like an heirloom, more enduring than grandma's jewelry. So, what do we do now? David asked, the anger in his voice replaced by something more vulnerable. How do we break the cycle? We start by telling the truth, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. The whole truth, no matter how uncomfortable. I took a deep breath. I've been having debilitating migraines for months from the stress. Sometimes I can't get out of bed for days. The medication costs a fortune without insurance, but without it, I can't function enough to job hunt effectively. My business partner wants to buy me out, Uncle Arthur confessed. The company isn't doing well. Hasn't been for years. I've been working 70-hour weeks trying to keep it afloat. I've been thinking about going back to teaching, Mom said. I love you all, but I need something that's just mine. I feel invisible sometimes. Sarah and I have been in couples therapy for 6 months, David admitted. The baby wasn't planned, and we've been struggling to adjust to the idea. One by one, we unloaded our burdens, our fears, our secret struggles. With each confession, the air seemed to clear a little more, making room for something new to grow in the space between us. Something honest, and though painful, ultimately healthier than the comfortable lies we'd been living with. As our revelations gradually exhausted themselves, a strange calm settled over the dining room. The fancy china Mom had set out remained largely untouched, the food cold and forgotten. None of us had much appetite anymore. I think we should move to the living room, Uncle Arthur suggested, his voice softer, from talking more openly in the past hour than he probably had in years. More comfortable there. We migrated silently, each lost in our own thoughts. The familiar living room, with its worn leather sofa and the recliner where Uncle Arthur had read us bedtime stories when we were small, felt like neutral territory after the battlefield of the dining table. I curled up in the corner of the sofa, suddenly exhausted. Mom sat nearby but left space between us, respecting the invisible barrier my hurt had erected. Uncle Arthur took his usual recliner while David and Sarah settled on the love seat. I don't know whether to be angry or grateful, I finally said, breaking the silence. Part of me is furious that you went behind my back, that you all knew I was struggling and pretended not to know. But another part recognizes that without that money, I might be homeless right now. Mom's hands twisted in her lap. I never meant to betray your trust, Clara. I couldn't bear knowing you were in trouble and doing nothing. But you took away my agency, I said. My right to make my own choices, even if those choices were bad ones. You're right, she acknowledged. And I saw how difficult that admission was for her. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself from the pain of seeing you struggle. Uncle Arthur leaned forward in his chair. I think we all need to acknowledge that our intentions, however good, created this mess. Evelyn shouldn't have sent money behind everyone's backs, but Clara, you shouldn't have hidden your job loss either. I know, I admitted. Pride is expensive. What happens now? David asked the question we were all thinking. Do we just go back to pretending after this? No, Uncle Arthur said firmly. We can't unring this bell. And honestly, I don't want to. Neither do I, Mom agreed. As painful as this is, it feels like finally lancing a wound that's been festering for years. I considered the metaphor and found it pertinent. The exposure hurt terribly, but perhaps it was the only way to begin healing. I think we need some ground rules going forward, I suggested. New family agreements. Like what? David asked. Like honesty, I said, real honesty. Even when it's uncomfortable. If I'm struggling, I'll tell you. But in return, I need you all to respect my independence, offer help directly, and accept my answer, even if it's no. That seems fair, Uncle Arthur nodded. And I need to know that help doesn't come with strings attached, I continued. Not from any of you. The money was never about controlling you, Mom protested. Maybe not consciously, I acknowledged. But there's a power dynamic in secret giving. You knew something I didn't. You were influencing my life without my knowledge or consent. Mom was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I can see that now. I have a suggestion, Sarah offered. David and I have found therapy really helpful. Maybe family counseling would give you all a safe space to continue these conversations with some guidance. Uncle Arthur's immediate frown told me what he thought of that idea. But to my surprise, he didn't dismiss it outright. Maybe, he said reluctantly. I'm not big on talking to strangers about family business, but clearly we haven't been handling things well on our own. I'd be willing to try it, Mom said, sounding relieved at the suggestion. Me, too, I agreed. But in the meantime, I want to talk about the money. Everyone tensed again. I'll pay it back, I said firmly. Every penny, once I'm working again. Absolutely not. Mom insisted. It was a gift. A gift I didn't know I was receiving, I pointed out. Besides, that money came from family heirlooms that should have stayed in the family. The jewelry was meant for you eventually anyway, Mom said. Not like this, I insisted. Not sold off piece by piece in secret. What if we compromise? Uncle Arthur suggested. Clara, when you're back on your feet, you don't repay the money directly. Instead, you start a savings account for your own future children, or to replace the heirlooms someday. The suggestion resonated. It wasn't about the money itself, but what it represented: family legacy, support, continuity. I could do that, I agreed quietly. And in the meantime, David said surprisingly, if you need help while job hunting, I might be able to offer you some contract work for the company, just until you find something permanent. No special treatment, regular pay for regular work. I looked at my brother, seeing a genuine olive branch in his offer. I'd appreciate that. And I'll be direct about what we can and can't afford to help with, Mom promised. No more secret support. If you're really in trouble, Uncle Arthur added, we want to know. Not so we can fix it for you, but so we can support you while you fix it yourself. The conversation continued as evening turned to night. We talked about boundaries and expectations, about communication styles and triggers. We made plans for weekly family calls where everyone would share one challenge they were facing, no matter how small. Uncle Arthur reluctantly agreed to try 3 sessions of family therapy before deciding whether to continue. As exhaustion began to overtake us, Sarah, now visibly tired from the emotional marathon, asked the question that had been hovering unspoken. So, what about tomorrow, and the next day? How do we make sure we don't slip back into old patterns? One day at a time, Mom said simply. New habits don't form overnight. And we hold each other accountable, I added gently but firmly. As David and Sarah prepared to leave, my brother pulled me aside. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for resenting you all these years. I should have just talked to you. And I'm sorry for not seeing how my choices affected you, I replied. We've both been stuck in our own narratives. We hugged awkwardly, rusty at showing physical affection to each other, but it was a start. As I prepared to leave as well, Mom handed me a small package. Open it when you get home, she said. Back in my tiny studio apartment, I unwrapped the package to find a small silver locket, one of Grandma's pieces that hadn't been sold. Inside was a tiny photo of our family from years ago, all smiling on a summer vacation. Tucked into the box was a note in Mom's handwriting: some treasures can't be sold. Love, Mom. I closed the locket gently, tears welling in my eyes. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, it felt like we were all finally walking it together, in the light rather than in shadow. It's been 3 months since that explosive Christmas dinner. It's remarkable how a single question, has the money helped, could unravel decades of family dynamics in minutes. Sometimes I wonder if Uncle Arthur's slip was entirely accidental, or if some part of him wanted the truth to finally come out. We haven't discussed that possibility, but I've caught him looking more relaxed these days, as if unburdened. The changes in our family haven't been dramatic or instantaneous. They've come in small moments, in hesitant conversations, in the conscious choice to speak truth even when silence would be easier. We established weekly family video calls that we've maintained faithfully. The first few were awkward. None of us quite knew how to navigate our new commitment to honesty without the buffer of our usual polite evasions. But gradually, we've developed a rhythm. Each person shares one challenge they're facing, no matter how small. No fixing, just listening and supporting. Last week, Uncle Arthur admitted he was struggling with the idea of selling his business. For the first time, I saw him vulnerable, without shame, asking for perspectives rather than presenting decisions already made. Mom shared her fear of returning to teaching after so many years away. David talked about feeling overwhelmed by impending fatherhood. And I confessed my anxiety about an upcoming job interview, my first serious prospect since the layoff. That's been another significant change. 2 weeks after our family meltdown, I received an unexpected call from one of Uncle Arthur's business associates who needed someone with financial expertise for a growing tech company in Burlington. I was suspicious at first, another secret intervention. But Uncle Arthur swore he hadn't orchestrated it. Sometimes the universe just has its own timing. I moved back to Vermont last month, not to my mother's house, but to a modest apartment 15 minutes away. The job pays less than my Boston position, but the cost of living is dramatically lower, and I'm no longer spending money to maintain appearances I can't afford. My migraines have decreased significantly with the reduction in stress. Mom and I have been rebuilding our relationship slowly. We meet for coffee weekly, just the two of us. At first, we stuck to safe topics, but gradually we've begun discussing deeper issues, her concerns about her relationship with Uncle Arthur, my fears about starting over professionally. She's returned to teaching part-time at the community college, something she's wanted to do for years but never pursued because of her self-assigned role as family caretaker. I defined myself by what I did for everyone else, she told me during one of our coffee dates. I forgot who I was outside of being your mother and Arthur's sister. And I was so determined to be different from you that I didn't recognize when I was making the same mistakes, just in reverse, I admitted. I tried so hard to be completely independent that I isolated myself. The family therapy sessions Uncle Arthur reluctantly agreed to have been surprisingly productive. Dr. Winters, our therapist, identified patterns none of us had recognized, how Uncle Arthur's need for control and Mom's need to nurture had created a dynamic where honest communication felt dangerous. How David and I had internalized those patterns in different ways. Your family operates on unspoken rules, she observed in our third session. The primary one being, problems should be solved privately, not discussed openly. That might work for simple issues, but for complex emotional matters, it's disastrous. Uncle Arthur, to his credit, has been trying. After our 5th session, he pulled me aside. This talking business isn't natural for me, he admitted gruffly. But I'm beginning to see the damage my silence has done. The biggest surprise has been my evolving relationship with David. Without the undercurrent of competition and resentment, we've discovered we actually enjoy each other's company. He's been teaching me about the construction business on weekends, and I've been helping him modernize their accounting systems. I always thought you looked down on the family business, he confessed one Saturday as we toured a worksite. And I always thought you resented me for leaving, I replied. I did, he admitted. But not because you left. Because you seemed to do it so easily. Like staying close to family was somehow less valuable than making it on your own. It wasn't easy, I told him. I was terrified. But I needed to prove something to myself. And did you? He asked. I considered the question. Yes and no. I proved I could survive on my own, but I also learned that independence isn't the same as isolation. Connection isn't weakness. As for the money Mom secretly sent me, we reached a resolution. I didn't pay it back directly, but I've started a special savings account. Part will eventually go toward replacing some of the heirloom jewelry when possible. The rest will be for future family needs, not just my own potential children someday, but a resource for anyone in our family who needs support. Think of it as the Miller Family Transparency Fund, David joked when I explained the concept. Mom's revelation about her own childhood financial trauma has helped me understand her actions better, even if I still don't agree with how she handled things. She grew up with secrets and sudden devastation, so she created more secrets trying to prevent the same for her children. It's a painful reminder that unhealed wounds often become the wounds we inflict on others, even with the best intentions. Uncle Arthur and Mom are also working on their sibling relationship. They've started meeting monthly to openly discuss financial matters and other family concerns, something they hadn't done truly honestly in decades. It's about learning to communicate without letting old resentments dictate their interactions. For two people who often bristled at each other's opinions, it seems like a promising new chapter. The most profound lesson I've taken from all of this is the difference between enabling and supporting. Real support respects autonomy and dignity. It comes with honest communication, not secret machinations. It's offering a hand while allowing the other person to decide whether to take it. Mom's secret financial help came from love, but it was enabling rather than truly supportive because it reinforced patterns of dishonesty and pride. True support would have been creating a family environment where I felt safe admitting my struggles without fear of judgment or loss of independence. That's what we're building now, slowly and imperfectly, but with intention. Last Sunday, at our most recent family dinner, now a genuine monthly tradition rather than an obligation, we used Mom's fancy china again. But this time, it wasn't to maintain appearances or pretend perfection. It was a conscious choice to celebrate how far we've come, to honor both our history and our new beginning. As we passed dishes around the table, Uncle Arthur paused, his fork hovering over his plate. "I'm proud of us," he said simply. From a man who once communicated primarily in grunts and nods, it was practically a sonnet. The road to genuine family healing is longer than 3 months. Of course, we still stumble. Old patterns emerge under stress. Just last week, I caught myself downplaying a financial concern during our family call, the familiar urge to appear self-sufficient rising automatically. But the difference now is that I recognized it, took a breath, and then told the truth. And my family listened, without trying to fix it, without judgment, offering support without demanding control. Truth, it turns out, is like any other muscle. It strengthens with use. This whole experience really got me thinking about how we communicate, or don't communicate, with the people we love most. Have you ever been in a situation where a family secret blew up in your face, or where you had to learn to speak your truth? I'd really love to hear your stories and what you think. Let me know in the comments below.